everything about life is political. The issue is not that you resist change. The only question is in what direction is the change. We are living in times when the Chief Justice of India is handpicked by a consensus between the judiciary and the ruling party. What is the value system? And that's where I say the Constitution is my home. Nothing the Supreme Court does goes without challenge. Walk like you own this court, which is what I think I do. I do own the Supreme Court of India.
Hello and welcome. We have an incredible guest at DeKoder today, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court and the first woman to become the Additional Solicitor General of India, Ms. Indira Jaising. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us. The Constitution is my home, especially relevant in the times that we're living in today. But, you know, as I was going through the book, I read this very interesting line where you said the Constitution is a living companion. And I wanted to actually start with this because the current dispensation, the BJP government, the NDA government, has for long argued about changes in the Constitution. Does that, the definition of it being a living companion, does that make that a valid argument that we must change the Constitution, that it's time?
You know that our Constitution has been amended several times since it came into existence, perhaps the largest number of times of any constitution in the world. So the issue is not that you resist change. Yes, companions change. You change towards your companion. The only question is in what direction is the change? And I would argue that there is actually a need to ensure that our rights, especially our right to life, liberty, and free speech, need to be entrenched. And if the change was in that direction, I would welcome it.
Right. Another bit that I thought was very interesting, again, you said, and you're speaking to Ritu, and she says, for us women, the personal is the political.
Yeah.
And I thought, isn't the personal the political for everyone? Because especially nowadays, when someone says, oh, I'm not political, what does that even mean? And how can you be apolitical, or does that, because everything is political?
Yeah, I think there is still a difference when it comes to women. And I think the difference reflects itself in social and economic rights, because there is hardly any doubt that in terms of their social and economic status, there is no question of equality with men. And because equality is a political issue, the personal is political for women. However, your point is equally interesting because you say that everything about life is political. Yes, everything about life is political. But the political also can be, so to say, decoded into the social, the economic, the civil. Our political rights, such as the right to vote, the right to citizenship, in law they fall into different categories. And the approach of the Constitution to these rights is different. The approach of international law to these rights is different. It is normally considered that your social and economic rights are not immediately enforceable. They're progressively enforceable. But your civil and political rights are immediately enforceable. And one of them, of course, is the right to non-discrimination. So, as you know, that's a very significant right for women, the right not to be discriminated against. So it's really all about, as you rightly point out, it's really about life.
When you're talking about, your personal journey and your parents, and you said, watching my mother's freedom shrink under the weight of custom and expectation. And I thought, how interesting, you're speaking about your mother so many years ago. And I wanted to sort of bring it to today about the comments about the women at this, recent Gen Z protest. And nothing has really changed. Women are still expected to stay within boxes and behave a certain way. And I just wanted for you to speak about it in terms of how do you look at the justice system and the and its outlook towards women?
Okay. I would not entirely agree with that comment that nothing has changed from my mother's time. I think, for example, I've always said that I owe my right to work and to be the lawyer I am to Dr. Ambedkar's Constitution. In particular, the right not to be discriminated against. And I think that is what opened up the pathway for women in the legal profession. So things have changed. It's not that things have not changed, but there is a very, very strange dichotomy between women in the public domain and women in the private domain. And this is what has not changed. It's very disturbing, in fact. So while, your NDA government or whatever can accept that a woman would go out to work, the minute she sets her foot on the angan of the home, she has to be a different person.
Yeah.
She has to be, subservient, sometimes to a joint Hindu family, as my mother was. My mother, of course, didn't go out and work. But even today, you go out and work, you come back, you're subservient to the joint Hindu family, or even if it's a nuclear family, that role has not changed. So I guess in a way, what we feminists have been saying for a long time, that we don't accept this division between the public and the private, continues to be a simple truth. That division still exists. So you are expected to dress a certain way. Even if you go out in the public domain, you're expected to do your karwa chauths. It's very often a holiday. You're expected to do everything that the good wife is meant to do. It is really an impossible thing which I don't understand.
And was that sort of, you felt, reflected in the way a lot of people reacted to these young student women protesters in the recent protests? Because, they were out there, they were making a point, as their male counterparts were. Is that sort of that societal reaction still?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was more to do with the female body. And what I noticed, that the attack was on their sexuality and on their sexual organs. And this is what is, again, very, very disturbing. So you're even willing to accept a woman protester. Not that you're not accepting a woman protester, but she's a woman protester, not a protester. And that is why I read a lot of accounts about the way women were completely attacked in their elemental bodies. And that, I think, was the worst and the most disturbing part of the way women were treated at the protest.
Another bit that was very, very interesting, and you said that, when you were deciding to become a lawyer and sort of growing up, you said the romance of the Supreme Court, the center of the constitutional litigation in the country, beckoned me there. Is the romance still there? Does it continue?
I think the romance is not only there, it's probably deepened. From being a romance, it's become a sense of ownership. And if you notice a particular sentence in the book, which is one of my favorite sentences, when I meet young lawyers who come to me and say, what is your advice to me? I tell them only one thing: walk like you own this court, which is what I think I do. I do own the Supreme Court of India.
But, it's so interesting. You are this stalwart, you're one of the most recognized faces in the judiciary. You've also been a very fierce critic of the Collegium system and of judges accepting post-retirement posts. If you were to redesign how India picks its judges, what would you do?
I would probably ask for a public hearing where we could question the proposed appointee about their trajectory of politics, their knowledge of jurisprudence, their understanding of precedents, their understanding of their own role in the Supreme Court of India. This, to me, would be the most not only transparent, but the most acceptable way of making appointments. It's not about age. It's not about seniority, that we can see. We are living in times when the Chief Justice of India is handpicked by a consensus between the judiciary and the ruling party, which I find completely unacceptable. Because there are no criteria to it at all. But we know who the Chief Justice of India is going to be into the 2030s. And this amazes me. It's something new which we had not seen before. So there's a lot which can change.
But, and what you said about how judges are now being handpicked, and that kind of leads back to what we were discussing about deference. And, you said, you tell young lawyers, go and sort of be in the court like you own the court. But does that really work in today's day and age, ma'am? Because, again, in the book, you speak about the time that you said you began noticing a quite deference among judges to executive authority. There's a growing belief that the government knows best what serves the nation and therefore ought not to be questioned. Such deference effectively amounts to an abdication of judicial responsibility and reflects a failure to enforce the Constitution. Regrettably, this tendency remains deeply embedded in the Indian judicial thinking. And that really is...
blows up, yeah. I stand by what I've said there, and I regret to note that this deference has deepened over the years. It is, see, when things go without challenge, they become the new normal. And that is definitely something that's happened in the legal profession in India. And today we have like a Solicitor General of India who's been there for 11 years, but ask the question, what is the outcome of those 11 years? And you might just about draw a blank. Why I say this not because it's a personal comment. I say it because because of the relationship between the judiciary and the legal profession has become converse. You asked the question about deference, like whether lawyers have this deference towards judges. Today it's the other way around. It's the judges who defer to the lawyers. And this is very disturbing because the legal profession is dominated by appointments made by political parties to law officers in the Supreme Court of India. So you can see the Supreme Court of India crawling with law officers appointed by all the state governments and by the central government. The large chunk of lawyers today are law officers appointed by various state governments and by the center. So there is a danger of the legal profession losing its autonomy and its independence.
Are you saying you're still hopeful that it hasn't lost its autonomy? I mean, with the way everyone says, every judge sort of going out and then becoming a Rajya Sabha MP, and I also don't want to... Yeah.
You're right, but then people ask me the question that, ma'am, how do you survive in this milieu? And the answer to that is, I survive, I succeed. Which means there is a space there. There is a space there that not just me, many of us have to occupy. And it is happening.
So is it because, Ms. Jaising, and I thought that was, again, very interesting, because there are those like you. Is it just because somewhere, you see these student protesters who are sort of out there and fighting for their rights, but you also see a chunk of young people who possibly are just not the easy way out, but it's like, why take up challenges? Do you feel that?
Oh, there's no doubt about it, because there are gains to be made by doing that. There's just no doubt about that. The issue, I guess, is only what is the value system? And that's where I say the Constitution is my home. Okay, it's just about what are the values that you want to live by, or that you want the legal system to live by, or that you want your judges to live by, or that you want the Supreme Court to live by.
Again, in the book, one of the things that is very interesting is you said in India, discrimination cannot be separated from religion. More so than in the current times. Religion is the hook on which everything hangs. It defines how we pray, how we love, have sex, whom we marry, how we raise our children, how we dress, how we deal with property, and even how and what we eat. Religion becomes the framework through which hierarchy is maintained, and law often reinforces it instead of disrupting it.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, so many people have written and talked about this in different contexts. Dr. Ambedkar said exactly the same thing in the context of caste. And there are feminist scholars who've said this in the context of patriarchy and misogyny. But I think India goes a step further. It also has this peg, as I say, religion to hang on for everything, including our political rights. And of course, the ever-present problem of personal laws that all of us are governed by our Hindu law. It can't be more explicit than that. I'm governed by Hindu law. Someone else is governed by Muslim law. What is Hindu? What is Muslim? It's religion.
Right. So then, is it time for a uniform civil code? And what is that shape and form?
So that is a very difficult question to answer. Rather than a legal question, it's a political question. If it's a legal question, it's very straightforward. All personal laws have discriminatory provisions which really need to go out of the window. But when you frame it as a political question, you come up against things like the rights of minorities. But I also believe it's also about the rights of majorities, because Hindu women also face a lot of discrimination. Apart from discrimination, they also face stereotyping. But framed as a political question, the question becomes one of timing and inappropriate to raise issues of this kind at a time when, in any case, the whole country is going Hindutva.
In your many, many years of being a lawyer in the sort of, these landmark cases that you have done, toughest case yet and the most challenging one that sort of stays with you?
Well, not one but two, but it's like climbing a staircase and going higher and higher. The first was the most difficult was the Saira Banu, but the most satisfying as well. Yeah. And the reason why it was so difficult is because in this country, custom has the force of law. That's a very tough nut to crack. Unless you acknowledge that a custom which has the force of law is capable of being challenged on constitutional grounds. In other words, a discriminatory custom which has the force of law cannot be allowed to survive. Until then, the last case will not have been argued. Now, this found its culmination in the arguments in the Sabarimala case, where the judgment is yet to be delivered. And the question was to be confronted head on.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that the temple administration relied on, and strangely enough, while the case was being argued, we went through two different governments in Kerala. We went through a right-wing government and a left-wing government, and we went through a Congress government. And all of them took the same stand. And some of them just refused to address the issue that a custom claimed by the temple administration, namely that women between the ages of 10 and 50 cannot enter a temple, cannot be challenged. I say it can be challenged. And I did argue that. But the judgment is awaited. There are 9 judges there, and I will not be surprised if there are 9 judgments, which means that there will be no law declared by the Supreme Court in that case.
But there is also this whole thing, and like you said, that, there is so much religion embedded into India in our laws that no matter what government, it could be left, right, centrist, on certain questions, they all stay the same. And which is why I wanted to ask you that you've lived through the emergency as a young lawyer. You're a senior lawyer now. And between the two eras, what is it that was right? What is it that is wrong? How would you compare the two at all?
So the question is not right or wrong. The question is, to what extent were you able to protest and challenge the developments? I found it easier to challenge the emergency for the simple reason that there was a document on the table which declared the emergency. In today's context, there is no document on the table which enables you to challenge it.
Right.
It may not be a document of emergency, it could be any other document. Even Hindutva is creeping Hindutva. It has not been introduced into the constitution, and I'm glad about that. But it's far more difficult to challenge an unwritten practice,
Right.
a custom, and unlawful behavior. It's easy to challenge a law which is unconstitutional, but it's impossible to challenge something that's being worked out outside the framework of the law.
Okay, I'm going to end with what is it, there are sealed covers, there are delayed hearings and cases, just going on. So today, what is it that worries you most about the Supreme Court, and what is it that gives you hope?
The capture of the Supreme Court by ruling parties is what worries me the most. We're meeting soon after Independence Day, and if you don't have an independent judiciary, you can't call yourself an independent country. So that bothers me a lot. And what gives me hope, I come back to the same issue. I and many other lawyers who believe in the Constitution. They have a space in the Supreme Court of India. So that gives me hope. Nothing the Supreme Court does goes without challenge.
Thank you so much. The book is The Constitution is My Home. If you're a lawyer, definitely go buy it and read it. But if not, even then, this is something worth a read. Thank you.
Thank you very much.